Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty for December the 23rd, 2022, 2 days from Christmas Day, and it's episode 85. And today is something that is a little different. We will start off with talking about what we have been or have not been working on lately and a few other business pieces. And then we'll jump into the main topic suggested by one of our subscribers who would like to have a little tour of some of the things that we consider, get my fingers in the shot here, antiques. Oh, we're not antique collectors or anything like that, but we do have some older pieces that have been handed down to us from, a generation or two ago and whatnot that have special meaning to us. So that's what we're going to do today. But first, let's jump right into what's Walter been working on.
Nothing.
Oh, okay. So that was fast and quick. But you were talking the other day about future bags,
Yeah, I want to do some more bags, different kinds of bags.
like different kind of like in what way? You mean like not totes, but
I don't know. Yeah, it's sort of
tote
totes,
bags by any?
yeah, something like
I
that.
have several patterns that I've not
Yeah,
done yet. They might be interesting. So I've got the Mary Poppins bag
yeah, I was sort of thinking of something like that.
because I've got the hardware for it too. I've had it for like, over a year, probably. It's going to get to that. Never got to it yet. I do want to do more bags in the future, but well, more about why the future might be a very busy time for a lot of reasons. But first of all, here I will show you what I have just finished. Speaking of projects that take a long time, this is my bookshelf wall hanging quilt, whatever you want to call it. I would never use it as a quilt because it's not got the substance for a quilt, because this is all in the hoop applique and embroidery, and it now hangs on my wall where I used to have my kooky cats uh, wall hanging. That's been retired to or replaced into Lucy's room now in there and keep her company. And so I have this one up. Now, this one, I started this. I can't remember when I started it. I think I started like last February or something.
Quite a while ago.
Yeah, pretty much at the beginning of this year. And I worked on it off and on, but it was one of those projects that it just takes time because you're making all these different blocks. And in the time that it took me to finish this, they came out with about 4 more blocks and an additional add-on pack. So I bought those as well, and I've done them. You will see that there are some things that are a repeat, but I have flipped them or used different fabric on them. Like if you see the kitty cats there and bookends and things like that. You could customize the wording on some of the book spines. Not all the book spines have wording. Some of them were pre-done, but there's a way you can go into your embroidery machine itself and change that. And I think I did in a couple of cases, but I didn't do it too much. It was kind of fun to do, but it was a bit tedious because essentially each of these blocks go together the same way. It puts down a stitch line or replacement line, you throw down the fabric, it tacks it down, you trim it off, and away you go. And
What did you use for the silver fabric?
okay, good question. The silver fabric isn't actually fabric, or the gold, it's mylar. Mylar is a plastic basically, but you can sew on it and you can actually iron on it as well with a low temperature iron. And so that's supposed to be a mirror kind of a thing, and they recommended that. So I'd never worked with mylar before. Now, if you take a look down in this bottom corner, this decanter, that's on mylar, but there's a lot of stitching on that. But it looks kind of cool because it looks like crystal. But I did that same one in another spot. Where's the gold decanter? This one. This one is just stitching. There isn't anything. It's just stitching right on top of the background fabric in a gold thread, and I didn't use any mylar on it. I just want to see the difference. But they do look a little bit different with it. And the mirrors, this mirror up here has mylar in it, and I guess that's the only mirror. Yeah, these other ones were landscape. I did think about using the mylar in here in the landscape ones, but I decided not to because I thought they'd make a better background for the kitties. Now, the kitties did not come with this pattern. Those were ones I took from another project, and decided to again drop them into this as well because I thought it made it kind of interesting. Oh, and I think there's Mylar. There might not be any Mylar on that one. Give the idea of glass.
Yeah, I think there's something sparkly on one.
Oh, is there? You can see it probably shows up in real life better. I think the same
Yeah.
with this one. So yeah, I used Mylar. Mylar's fairly easy to work with. It's a little bit on the edges. You want to make sure that there is a good satin stitch on the edges because when you cut it away, um, it will have a tendency to it can tear on it unless it has a good satin stitch on it. But yeah, kind of different. Now the one thing is this had huge seams. Like you were supposed to cut a ½ inch around from the outside stitched line, which you can't see because it's buried in the seam allowance, but it's your guidance for sewing all these little squares together. And they're huge and they're thick because there's a couple of layers of fabric. In some cases, there is batting and then there's stabilizer too. So on the back of this quilt, it's really quite rough. And they didn't call, they just want you to put the backing fabric on it. They didn't say anything about putting in a layer of batting. I did. I put a layer of battleizer just to smooth it out at the back a little bit. Not that anybody's really looking at the back because this is a wall hanging. So, don't let people peel it up from your wall kind of a thing. No, let me see your back. No, don't look at it. Cut off your fingers. But I did that. But the one thing I wanted to do, in order to hold the backing onto it, I did stitch in the ditch around each of the blocks and across. But I had thought of, and I didn't realize it until I got the binding on, that I wanted to do a little bit of straight line quilting in along these borders. By the way, this isn't wonky. It's the way I took the picture, it's sort of the way it's hanging with it. So, no, these are straight because I squared it all up. But it's fine for what it is. It's a wall hanging. There you go. I kind of like making those things, but they take a long time to do. So, anyways, that's what I've been up to. And yeah. Okay. Now, some other things that were happening. So remember the Sewers Club on Idiot Quilter? I did the box reveals, the subscription box, and I showed you all the fabrics in that one. And I've decided that I'm going to get that subscription box another 1 or 2 times anyways, unless it starts to repeat itself or I'm really finding that I'm getting stuff. Some people have been complaining that they're getting fabric they did not want. And you see, this particular company allows you to choose and exclude ones that you want, ones you don't want. And some people were saying, like, for example, they didn't want anything with floral on it. Well, they got some with floral on it. And they had chosen that and they were a little PO'd at that. So I'm going to watch for that. But in the meantime, I noticed that there's a whole lot of Americans that seem to be ambassadors for the Sewers Club. Sewers Club is Canadian. But I'm seeing this on American channels, and I have yet to see it on a Canadian channel. There might be one out there. I just haven't seen the channel yet. So I reached out to them and to see if I could be one of their ambassadors and what that would involve. And quite frankly, can I get free product from this as well? So they were sort of shutting down operations over Christmas a little bit. And she's supposed to get back to me, the owner of it, I think her name's Elizabeth, supposed to get back to me in January. So we'll see what happens from there. I have never, ever been an ambassador or sponsor for any products before. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And we have had some dilemmas. And when I say we, I mean Walter with his ordering lately. You heard the story about Amazon with the SF-101. Well, we got that resolved. In fact, we did very well on that, and I talked about that on the Idiot Quilter this week. Essentially, Walter got his money back, all his money back, and some, and then some. And that's because the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and I was the squeaky wheel. But in the meantime, I have a little problem with cross-border
Pickups.
services, pickups.
Yeah, I was dealing with this company earlier this year that I've ordered stuff from the United States, and they deliver it to an address in New York, and then they tell you the package is there, and then you pay them and they bring it across the border type of thing. Well, it seems they lost my package.
Put the wrong address on it, actually.
Yeah, well, actually, I found out when they kept saying, well, it didn't arrive, right? So I put in an order claim with FedEx, which they came back to me and said, no, they delivered it to the right address, and they had a signature for it. And then but anyway, in the meantime, on Sunday night, I got a strange phone call from somebody that said that they had received my package in the mail to their house. Now, cross-border pickups, you can either pick up the stuff from them directly, right? Or you can have them ship it to your house. And he must have had it shipped to his house. Actually, he told me that. But anyway, he said he was going to drop the package back off at cross-border pickups. Meantime, I've been in contact with them. And I just got a note today that they have found my package.
Oh, yay.
And I could pick it up tomorrow.
Right.
So I think I'll probably try and get it next week sometime. So hopefully they've got it. So
Yeah. So lesson learned here. Not impressed. I
no.
mean, the first time was fine. It went.
I did it 2 times before and it worked out fine.
But
But this third time, no, it's not worth the hassle for getting it lost.
so, are you having them ship it to you?
No,
or
no,
you're
no. I'm
gonna
going to pick
Yes,
it
I was
up.
going to say.
I,
Okay.
I mean, I can go pick it up tomorrow.
Well, we're
No,
busy
I know
tomorrow.
we're busy
You
tomorrow.
got a turkey in the oven
I'll wait
tomorrow.
till they're open again on Wednesday. I'll confirm first that the package is there before I go pick it up.
Now, I have a vested interest in it because it's my Christmas present.
It's part of your Christmas present.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah. So, in Walter's mind, it's my fault because anything I touch goes to shit. It seems, anyways, with it, even though I didn't really touch this at all. But I don't know, I'd be a little
Yeah,
scared to try them again. I mean, yeah, you can say, well, one time, but also it's in the way that they kind of handled it when you first complained.
yeah.
They didn't really
Just
jump
so
all
we
over.
got it, but it wasn't in the shipment. Like because they claim that all they do is get bulk orders
Mhm.
from like FedEx and stuff like that, and then they tried to blame it on FedEx that it wasn't in the order, but somehow mysteriously it got delivered to somebody, and it had my name, and they give you a unit number for where it gets delivered to, and it had my name and unit number on it.
Hmm.
Seems odd.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Obviously, they're not too attentive.
So it sounds like we may have got it sorted out now, whenever. So, whatever. Okay. So another thing that's, well, no, I can't really tell you more than just this. Stephanie of Stephanie Stitches and I had a meeting this morning, a Zoom meeting, and we have got something planned, a couple of things planned starting in the new year. So watch this space for announcements about that. And while I'm talking about announcements, just a reminder that tomorrow night is Christmas Eve, December the 24th. It's always on the 24th of December. I don't know why. And we're having a Cocktails with Stephen and Walter Christmas special live. This will be a Zoom event, not a YouTube live, okay? If you go looking for it on YouTube, you will not find it. It is a Zoom event, but you will find a link for the Zoom. If you're not on my mailing list, anybody on my mailing list already got that sent to their mailbox. But for everybody else, it is listed in the show notes of this video today, and it's also in all my other videos from the past week and a half. So the link is there, and it's, for those of you that maybe aren't doing anything on Christmas Eve, maybe you're alone, you want to have a little fun, then come join us. Bring your favorite beverage, bring something to nibble on, bring something to show if you want. We'll have a little show and share, but this is going to be a show and share that goes beyond quilts. You can show a quilt, you can show sewing, you can show knitting, you can show crocheting, you can show us your underwear. Clean only, please. And if you've got a special Christmas decoration or something that means something to you, something that's traditional, because oftentimes we do have traditional things that we put out at Christmas time and they have maybe a family story or something to it, come bring it along, show it to us, and tell us the story if you feel comfortable doing so. We're going to maybe play a few games, a lot of chat, and probably from about 7 to maybe 9 p.m. Eastern time. Um, Maybe longer. It depends. If you people are keeping us really awake and excited, well, we'll just drink more and talk more with everybody. So that's tomorrow night, December 24th, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And down the road, join us for a So Day on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2023. And we're going to do something. I was playing with it today. I think I can make it work. That'll start at 8 a.m. That's a Sunday. Most people aren't doing a heck of a lot on New Year's Day, I know. So come work on a project, whatever you want to work on. But around 4 o'clock in the afternoon is also when we usually do Stephen and Walter Live. So I'm going to combine the two if I get the technology to work. So the So Day will be continuing. We'll click right into Stephen and Walter Live and we'll carry on with that. So we'll have sort of a studio audience and then our usual audience or bits and pieces thereof. I don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to give it a try. Maybe a disaster, it may not be. So stay tuned. So that's January the 1st. Okay, so on to antiquities and antiques. I went around the house and I took some picture of some things that meant things to us. And these are not, some are related to sewing and quilting, but many of them are not. And so we're going to start with the first one. And this is Walter's balls. Actually, it's his mother's balls, Christmas balls. And we have a whole box of these. And I put them all on the tree this year. And well, what's significant about them?
Well, when I was growing up as a kid, they were all ones that my parents had purchased. Actually, they're probably imported from Holland when they moved to Canada. And these are actually authentic glass, very fragile glass
Oh yeah,
balls.
ask me how I know about that.
And so I found them up in the attic when I was cleaning out my parents' house and took them home. So basically, they're ones that I remember used to hang on our tree when I was a little kid.
So the pink one and the one with the red and the green and the yellow one
Yeah.
and the other pinky one, those, and there's one in behind, a couple in behind there too. That blue one
Yeah.
in front is not
No.
one, or is it? Maybe it is.
I think it looks a little too new. But
Well,
I'm
I
not
was looking
sure.
at the thing on the top that holds it
Yeah, I'm
together
not sure.
because the balls I've got in the tree that are blue are not shiny like that. They're plastic.
Yeah,
I think that is one of them.
yeah.
I think there too. We used to have a bunch of those when I was a kid too, that my mother pulled out every year. And they were very much like these.
And over the years, if one drops off the tree, they easily break.
Oh,
So,
do they ever? If they hit carpet, they'll break. They're so
yeah,
fragile. Because a couple of years ago, I was putting some on the tree and one slipped out of well, actually, that little crown thing uh, just dropped out.
yeah.
And it hit the carpet and didn't hit it hard and it wasn't from a high weight and it just disintegrated.
Hmm.
It went to powder practically. So yeah, they're very, very fragile, um, to say the least. But they're very pretty and they look nice on the tree. Okay. This is also one of Walter's.
It's a shortwave radio imported from Holland when my parents moved to Canada in 1954. I have a written, I think it's built in the early 50s, this radio.
Yeah.
And it was a shortwave radio. It's actually not a stereo radio. It was just pre-stereo. And it has an FM band on it, and it has all kinds of AM type bands on it for all different countries at that time. And I haven't plugged it in for years, I'm afraid to, but it's an all tube radio. It's what they consider to be a portable radio.
It's pretty big and pretty heavy.
Yeah, and so I've kept it. When I was cleaning out my mom's house, nobody seemed to know. My two sisters didn't seem to have an interest in taking it, and I wasn't going to discard it. So
Well, I'm sure in its day it was an expensive
it
radio
was the top of the line Philips radio,
because it's
and
got push buttons.
it's it was hard to find information on it, but yeah, my dad said it was a fancy radio at that time because it had push buttons, and it hasn't. It probably doesn't work anymore. An electronic motor inside that causes it to go. Like,
Oh, gee, I
yeah.
didn't thought I thought maybe those might have been more mechanical.
No, there's a little motor in it, and it would make a noise, and it would move it
So the
into the.
switch underneath all the buttons is down there. What's that for?
That's a good question. I can't remember.
Hmm. And you got a lot of dials on it still
I
too.
think it's for the different bands that, because if you look at there's
Oh,
notches.
yeah, maybe. And then the buttons, if it puts, yeah, because there's little indicators above it. So,
Yeah,
hmm, actually very interesting, very uh sophisticated. And nice cabinetry too. Those were the days. That's what I mean. Portable.
yeah.
Yeah, I just put that up on. Try to use that as a boom box on
Well,
your
yeah,
shoulder.
it's a pretty big item. You can't really tell here, but it's a
It's
pretty,
substantial.
it's substantial. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, speaking of old radios, this is mine. This came from, as my father used to say, that came down from the farm, don't you know? Uh, yeah, but it was my grandparents' radio. Now, this was a floor model radio. I think it's a little older than what Walter's is. I would say this one is more like circa either early 1940s, late 1930s. Um, last I plugged it in, it's tubes as well. It worked. I wouldn't want to try to plug it in now because the plug on it is just brittle.
Well,
And
not only that, I talked to a guy earlier this year, last year, that's into these type of radios, and he says a lot of the capacitors go on them and
mm,
stuff, and then they become a fire hazard if you try and
yeah,
plug them in.
yeah, well, I wouldn't want to. But I do remember as a kid playing around with this, and my grandparents had it plugged in their living room, and they could listen to it. Um, Now the weird thing about this has an antenna. There's a big drum inside of it, great big thing. It looks like a filter for our hot tub almost.
Mm.
And it's got copper wire wrapped around
Mhm.
it. And I guess I remember when my grandparents had it in their house, they ran a wire, a really long wire, from that antenna up their chimney. It sat next to their fireplace. Their fireplace, they never used their fireplace. Well, they couldn't. I think part of the chimney had collapsed over the years because it was an old house. And they ran the wire out of that chimney, and it went across into the field behind their house, and it went up in a tree, and at the end of it they had it over a big thick limb of the tree, and there was a rock, and the wires wound around that rock, and it kept the wire tense, and that was the antenna. And I always wondered as a kid, they owned the field, so it was their field, it was their trees and stuff like that. But that's the way they got things on it. And it was also I'm not sure if it was shortwave. It had different bands, and there was a little light
Yeah,
in the
in those
center.
days they had it was primarily AM bands, so
Yeah,
AM bands were all and shortwave bands were common on those
yeah.
radios.
And yeah, I mean, you push it has little buttons on the front, and they had on. You can't see it in this picture because they're pretty much worn away. But they had the call letters for certain radio stations in Canada, and possibly into the States. So I guess if there's certain in those days there weren't a lot of radio stations. So you wanted CBC, you could push the ones at CBC, or I think there's one on there that says Wham.
Hmm.
Funny, I didn't hear George Michael or anything on it when I pushed that button, but um and the dials moved it around too. But this is what it looks like. It has never, as you can tell, it has never been refinished. In fact, on top of it, you can't see it in this picture, there's coffee cup wet rings because people just they were something that was in your house and people put their coffee down uh with it. And there's a little green light that went on in the center. You could see the little crystal. And that when that was on, you knew the radio was turned on. And I used to stare at that as a little kid because I thought if you looked in it far enough, you might be able to see the people that were talking or singing in it. But anyways, I got that because nobody else in my family really wanted it, and it went with the dining room suite that we're going to come to shortly. But before that, here's another musical device. Now, this is kind of a real curiosity for a good reason, but we'll talk about that in a second. It's a phonograph, and I have a set of 78s. That's what they were called. They're 78. They're big, heavy records. You could smash them. I have what was left in my grandparents' house of those, which were quite a few, but they used to have a lot more. But as the times changed, they put this thing up in their attic, in their storeroom kind of a thing, and there it sat. As a little kid, I played with it, and all the records, they blew up. What I mean by that is they took these records out. My grandfather, my father, and my uncle, that they were all duck hunters. So for practice, they would use these as skeets. You know, skeets are little clay pucks. You throw them in the air and you shoot at them. Well, they took these records and shot at them. So there they were, because they meant nothing to them. At the time, it had been replaced by modern technology, like 78s became 33 and a thirds. And I know some of the younger viewers, if there are any out there, won't have a clue what I'm talking about when I say a 33 RPM record. Probably don't even know what a 45 record is. But they shot them. But if they didn't shoot them up, my grandmother made them into flower pots. And you're going to say, flower pots over record? She'd put them in the oven. She'd melt them enough that you could actually fold the edges up and kind of crimp them, and then they would harden again, and she used them as flower pots or for like saucers under a flower pot kind of a thing. In the front, you see there's two little louvered windows or door slats. That's volume control. There's a little knob there on the side. If you turned it one way, those slats would open up, and depending on how far open you had them, the louder the music will get with it. And now the two little guys sitting on the center of it, don't hate me for this. Remember, it's historical because it is racist now. These little figures have jointed legs and arms, and they sit on this little platform that is resting on the spindle of the record player part. And as the record went around, that would vibrate and these little guys would dance. And I still have the original box for these. I'm not going to read what's on the box. It is absolutely racist, and I'm not going to tell you what they called these little guys. They had a very racist name for them, but they were made in about I think the box says 1917. Might even say 1904. I think it's 1917. And I've had a few of my friends that have been over here who get very politically correct and go, how can I have those out? It's historical. Get a grip. I'm not being racist by having these on them. There was other figures too. And I have another set, and I forget what they are. These are boxers. They sort of look like they're boxing. But what a novelty item. You know, you wouldn't find anything like that today. And the little platform they're standing on, that's a reproduction. The original one got lost somewhere
Well,
along
not
the
only
line.
that, nowadays with if you had a phonograph, actually, I mean, the vibration of the phonograph,
Well, you wouldn't have it.
you would no, it would screw up your
Yeah,
was audio or whatever.
yeah, it would. I mean, look at the needle on this sucker.
Yeah.
And I have a supply of needles as well. And they're kind of like a sewing needle in their size.
Kind of bizarre marketing, if you want to call it, when they did this sort of thing in there.
What, you mean for the little figures?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say this little stand is a reproduction. I got it off of eBay or something at one time back. My mother used to put little plastic and silky flowers in around it, and she decorated it for Christmas and stuff. She had it as a piece of home decor. But I just remember as a little kid playing with it. Loved it. And you play with the speed. Those little things coming off to the side on the opposite side where the needle is, that was your speed control. So, you know, the way wherever you put those on it with.
Well, not only that, to get the mechanism cranks. Right?
Yeah, it's crank.
So,
yeah, there's not a picture. The crank is on the side of it. It still works. It still works. And I would say well, I don't know how old it is. Probably 100 years old now, I guess. Because it's probably in around the might be 1930s. I would think it's probably more 1920s, or maybe, well, if those little characters were made in about 1917 according to their box, depending on when my grandparents. It's probably belonged to my great grandparents. Um, whenever they got this thing, so it may have been, so it could be very early 1900s. So I don't know, but I'll never sell it. I don't know who will ever want it after I'm gone. It'll probably end up somewhere, but it's just a piece of nostalgia and history. And I love shocking people when they come over and see these guys, and I read them the cover of the box, and it's like, how can you do that? It's not politically correct. I didn't write it. I didn't even buy it. So apparently I'm not supposed to display it either. So they say, well, too bad. It's my house, and I'll do it if I want to. So this is the dining room suite that I said goes with the radio. Now that corner cabinet is not part of it. That was Walter's mother, and it's relatively modern, but it fits there. But the buffet, the mirror, the chairs, the table, and the china cabinet are all part. And this was in my grandparents' house. So I inherited this when they had passed on, and it sat in storage for a few years until I had a place for it. When I moved from my 1-bedroom basement apartment up to a 2-bedroom apartment, I had a little dining room. So I refinished it all. I had never refinished wood in my life. This original set had a black lacquer on top of it. It was basically, there's a lot of, well, for the tabletop, it was a, what do you call it? Laminate on the kind of thing. You know, if you've ever stripped wood, stripping laminate, it can be done, but I didn't know how. So I went through a whole lot of stripper. I remember that whole summer I sniffed a lot of fumes and whatnot, but I redid everything and every piece came out different because I didn't know what I was doing. So you notice the china cabinet looks a little lighter than the buffet and the chairs.
The
Now,
corner cabinet came from my mom's place,
that's
so
what I
it's
said.
not fully associated with
Yeah,
it.
boy, you don't listen, do you?
I don't.
No, you just tune me right out. Oh, God, what do I look like? Never mind, it'll insult women if I say that. The only piece I didn't refinish was the mirror itself. And I love that mirror because if this picture doesn't show well, but if you look into the right corner there, you see some etching in it. And it's basically kind of an Art Deco. And I love Art Deco. Even the little brass handles on the hanging knobs, or what do you want to call them, on the buffet, those are all the original hardware to it as well. So I will never get rid of it. There's a couple of leaves for it. It opens fairly large. And if you look at the seat of the chairs, we've recovered them a couple of times. Well, this is the latest recovering. They had leather coverings on that were all dried up and cracking.
Yeah,
So
we really need to redo this room and get rid of the balloon curtains and stuff like that.
yeah, don't look at those curtains. Those are, hello, the 1980s called, and they want their balloons back with it. That's the only window that has balloons. We just haven't got around to doing
This room, yeah.
yeah, doing this room again. So yeah. But anyways, well, it's part of the nostalgia. It all goes with this. So yeah, now this would be, I'm not sure how old it is. I think my grandparents, I remember sitting at it as a kid in my grandparents' house. And if you see the light over top of it, again, that was a cheap fixture I bought when I lived in the apartment. I couldn't afford anything. Well, it wasn't that cheap. I paid over $100 for it, and that was in the like about 1982 or something. But I thought it fit with the dining room suite. I could have had the original light fixture my grandparents had, and I thought at the time it was ugly, and I didn't take it. And I kick myself to this day because I have seen rarely in antique places that light fixture that they had, and they want a lot of money for it. But it fit so well with this dining room suite. But alas, I do not own it. Okay, so this is from Walter's family.
Actually, that technically is not an antique. It's
I thought it was.
No, the other one is.
The other one.
There's one that's more bulbous and round.
Oh, one down below. Oh, I thought this was the antique
No,
one.
no,
Oh, well,
no.
forget this. This is not an antique. Moving on.
It's a modern antique.
Okay, modern antique. Okay, I suppose a lot of people probably know if you're of a certain age. This is a Hummel. My grandmother Barnum, my mother's mother, she collected Hummels. And I don't know how this is the only one I got. She marked each one with a label on it. So when she passed on, there were certain Hummels that were supposed to go to each of the grandchildren and whatnot. And I guess it's the one I got. I don't know why I got this guy. Hummels are not something that I ever liked. Don't hate them, but I wouldn't bother. The only reason I have it is because I inherited. Um, I don't think Hummels are worth much anymore. I've never really looked them up. They were just one of those little cute little figurines that people like to collect, I guess, at times.
Actually, if you go back to the previous one, right, that is actually colored Delft blue. That's what it is.
Oh,
You can
okay.
get Delft blue and actual blue, or you can get the colored version, which is this one. So
So
this is actually colored Delft blue.
so
So it's
those
probably, this one was probably manufactured in around the 80s.
yeah, so it's a modern antique, but
Yeah,
it's Delft. And if you don't know what Delft is a Dutch pottery
yeah.
that Holland is famous for. Okay, these are yours. These are
Yeah, these are
antiques.
antiques. My in the 19 early, I guess my grandfather ran a paint store or a paint shop, which where he would go and paint other people's houses
And he was in Holland.
in Holland, right? And in those days, painting was more of a science type of thing because you couldn't go out to the store and buy a bucket of paint and go to, let's say, go to Walmart or wherever you go or someplace or paint store and say, oh, I want this color blue number 157 or something like that, and get it mixed up. In the old days, you needed painters. You had to go to a paint shop and then they would have to custom mix the paint to a color to get that color that you want. And it wouldn't be a formula like they use today,
So
right?
not like
So
those plunger things or
no,
whatever
no,
they
no,
do.
they never had that when they went in the turn of the century. So it was more of a profession to be a painter, and you went and you hired a painter to paint your house and or whatever, and they would mix up the paint based on the color that you would like. And my grandfather had a shop, and my dad later on ended up working in it. And this would have been around the turn of the century at 1900. And my grandfather, the bell was over top of the door, the entry door, and the bell would ring when somebody would come into the shop. And the other thing is a what do you call it? A torch for certain type of painting techniques required a torch for the paint to set.
Hmm.
So it's a kerosene torch.
That would be dangerous.
Yeah, it was. You could actually start a fire with it.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a type of enamel that you had to create by using the torch.
So
So
these two things are possible murder weapons. One, you could burn somebody really badly or blow them up with the torch, and that
you
bell is
know,
heavy. It'd fall on
I
your head if it came off the
I
door.
remember my dad using this torch.
On your mother.
No,
On you.
he would use it when repairing auto body stuff
Hmm.
to torch the. I guess some of the auto body stuff needed to be heat set, so he used that to heat set the stuff.
Hmm. Well, these two items actually sit out on our fireplace mantle. Uh, Not at Christmas though, because I need the mantle for my decoration. So I take it off from there and just put them in another spot. So that's why they're sitting here just on the
So
table.
you can see with the torch that it's well used. My
Yeah,
dad used it all the time.
yeah.
I used to see him use it all the time.
And they're both very heavy. And that bell is really heavy,
Yeah, it is.
which they put that over a door.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully, yeah. Come on in. Bang. Yeah. Okay. This is also yours. This is a selection of things.
Yeah, these are two. It's not technically stained glass. I think it's an etched glass. The one in the lower part is a colorized etched glass, and the top one's just plain etched glass and with black. And
And Swallow.
Svala is the place that my parents lived.
And we have been there, both
Yeah,
of us.
and they have a big market there, and at the bottom you see the etching that says GROTEMARKT, which means the Great Market.
What
And-
does de Schilder what?
Okay.
What's that mean?
Okay, I'm not 100% sure what the translation is. The Schilder is the painter,
Mm.
right? And it says, I'm not 100% sure of the translation of the bottom. It's sort of like what he sees or something like that.
So now that has color in it and they're etched. So would that have been hand painted on the etching?
Yeah,
on
it
the
would have been
glass?
hand painted. Yeah, and that's what that hung in the window of the paint shop that my grandfather had. That's sort of like a nostalgia piece.
Well,
And then of course the Dutch shoes that we have.
but before you talk about the Dutch shoes, that first line, then you said that's the painter.
Yeah.
Okay, so your grandfather was a painter.
Yes,
so
he
that
was.
in his window
Yeah,
to
it was in his
designate
window,
what is
yeah.
what. Yeah, painter. So what about the wooden shoes? Those are real wooden shoes.
Yeah, they're real wooden shoes. They're probably over 100 years, almost 100 years old. I think they came from my grandparents' house, and wooden shoes were often used by farmers in the fields in Holland because the fields were muddy and they could get around on them, right? And they're very difficult to walk in because they don't bend, right? So, people, almost everybody in Holland had a pair that they would use for just doing things around the properties that they had. They were outdoor type shoes.
I think I tried them on once. I think I got my feet in them, and if I remember correctly, I expected them to be very uncomfortable, but actually they weren't.
They're
Now I
not
want to wear them all
well.
day.
They're
but
hard. They're not uncomfortable to stand in, but they're uncomfortable to walk in. But I think it's something that you get used to after a period of time.
okay, so wooden shoes.
The
Well,
farmers always used them. My parents and my grandparents weren't farmers, so
so they didn't wear them.
they had a pair. I don't know if my grandparents ever wore them or not. My grandfather might have at some point.
What's the decoration that's on them? Is that some just?
I don't know. There's
Burns
nothing. There's
ears.
no significance there for me. So
Okay, this is also one of Walter's.
I don't know about the little drawing that's there. I think it's a watercolor.
Didn't you think your grandfather did this?
No, my grandfather didn't do it because it's signed and it's not his name.
Oh, but did he make the frame?
But he made the frame. In the war, he did something called, what was it called?
Carving.
Chip carving.
Hmm.
And he did, this is an example of his chip carving, but he did whole trays, what do you call serving trays out of this. And I only have this and a couple of other tiny things that he did. And but he actually made entire cabinets all chip carved. Right. And my grandparents had one in their hallway, a great big huge cabinet, which eventually obviously went to kids and grandkids or whatever. When my grandparents died, they were large cabinets that couldn't be shipped over to Canada. So
didn't you at one point in life years ago, didn't you say you wanted to try?
yeah, I wanted to try.
And I bought you a set of
and I didn't get very far
That's for sure.
because I just don't have the knack in doing that. So
I think it takes a lot of patience.
yeah,
For one thing, and
I think my grandfather got stuck. Yeah, I don't know if he was ever in a prison or whatever that happened, but
this is news.
I don't know. I have no idea why he had the time to do that during the war, but he did have time to do that during the war. So
oh, that's interesting. Nobody left to ask about that.
yeah,
Who might have known. Now, this is another windmill picture. Now that
is my
that's your grandfather's.
So I was named after my grandfather, and so
What was your grandfather's name, shithead, too?
his name was Walter.
Walter?
Right?
Walter.
WOUTER. Walter. And my parents anglicized my name to Walter, so but Walter is the actual name of my grandfather, and he did a number of paintings. These are done on this is done on a piece of board, because there wasn't a lot of material available to paint on in early days. So people
But
painted
modern
on,
painters will paint on board too.
yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
what do they call that? I forget. I've got some of it.
yeah,
Forget what it's called, but
yeah. So he painted this windmill. This is one I have. My sister has a different one. Um, we have a few. There weren't too many paintings that came over with my parents from Europe that my grandfather did, so we kind of treasured the ones that we got. My grandfather did quite a few paintings, and I imagine there's lots around between grandkids and that got
now did he
moved
just
around.
do it for himself or did he sell some?
No, he never sold any. He
Hmm.
did it for himself. He did it as a hobby. My dad tried his hand at painting, and I have the one and only one that he ever did. And um, he didn't like artist type paintings. So,
Hmm. Well, I've always had a fascination with windmills, and I'll show you why. Because this comes from my family. My grandmother used to dabble in painting, and she did this one of a windmill, but this doesn't come uh, from Holland or something like that, because my family are not Dutch. This was not very far from the house that she lived in. There was a little in the Trent River, there was a little island, and there was a house on it. And I never saw this windmill when it was standing. I saw the ruins of it. It always fascinated me. It had fallen down over the years. And I think the people who built this little cottage, kind of a thing on this little island, had built this windmill more as a decorative piece. It wasn't really meant to do anything, not like, they use them in Holland to pump out water and to grind wheat and things like that with them. But I never saw it when it looked like this. This was from her memory. I just saw it when it was a ruin, and I was always fascinated with this painting. Now, is this a particularly great painting? No, it's not. But you were talking about painting on wood. My grandmother painted this one on wood in oils, and I inherited it, and it hangs in our living room upstairs. And I had it reframed. There was a god awful frame around this. My grandmother used to make her own frames too, and well, or she'd find old frames and use those, and some of them weren't that great. So I had this professionally matted and framed. I think it cost me quite a bit of money at the time that I did it, but I wanted something that would set it off. Um, because I have a couple of other paintings that my grandmother has done around, but this was always my favorite uh, when I was growing up. So, and I think she took some artistic license with the flowers and everything around there with it, because I don't remember it ever looking like that. Um, and in fact, I don't think it even exists now. It has long gone. That cottage and everything now is no longer there. I don't even know what the island is. I think the island, they either dredged it out of the Trent River for when they were doing something with it. Might have been in a boating lane or something like that. I don't think. Next time we're ever down that area, I have to take a look and see if I can spot it again. Um, so yeah, I've had windmills in my life too. Okay, these, speaking of my grandmother, when I was cleaning out my mother's apartment when she went in the nursing home and that, I found these linens. There's a few more than just here. There's just a few of them, and they were all done by hand, the embroidery by hand by my grandmother, and the doilies as well. She crocheted. My grandmother Barnum, my mother's mother, did a lot of stuff. She didn't just quilt, she did a lot of handwork, and she used to win um awards in county fairs and other things all the time since the time she was a girl. And so I had these, and although really in today's decor you're not going to put these out, if anything says old lady's house and we putting these things out, but I always thought I'd like to somehow incorporate them into a quilt. I'm not really sure how. probably have to use the method you use for a t-shirt quilt or something like that. I don't know, but they're all pristine. I don't know if any of them ever actually got used. I think she made them all up, and they may have been in my mother's collection of things that before she got married. You know how they used to put together hope chests for girls, or like for their trousseau or whatever. Um, this may have been where these had come from, and my mother never ever used them. But they're all hand done. You don't find that kind of workmanship anymore, that's for sure. And then a sewing machine. Okay, so this is Walter's, is your mother's sewing
It
machine,
was my
wasn't it?
mother's sewing machine.
And it's a
Actually,
hand crank.
she used it quite a bit to sew her own dresses, and my sisters learned how to sew on it, and I learned how to wind bobbins on it. And
And it has a case. It's a portable.
it's a case. It's a hand crank model. It was probably made in the 40s or whatever. A lot of companies, I guess, made didn't want to make ones with a lot of these sewing machines were made in Germany, and because of the war, um, a lot of companies wanted to disassociate their sewing machine names from German names, so they put another name on it. And I can't find other and much history about this particular sewing machine.
Thing weighs a ton.
And it could possibly be a singer with a different name on it, or also there were ones where, like somebody would, some big store would put their brand name on it or something like that. So,
Well, is that Dutch on the manual?
yeah, the manual's in Dutch. It's
Hmm.
usage and handling of sewing machine.
Hmm.
NAAIM machine is sewing machine.
Hmm.
It's nine machine.
It's nine machine.
Yeah.
That's not your machine. It's
Yeah.
nine machine.
So that's the manual.
Yeah. And it's got the case still that goes on it for
Yeah.
carrying it around, but it
And
weighs a
then
ton.
the little box at the bottom in the corner with the green thing on it. The green thing's actually a pincushion.
Oh, is it?
And it moves out of the way, and underneath it is where you kept all your bobbins and everything.
Oh,
And then there's a little, if you see the little wheel in front of the big wheel and the heart-shaped thing, that's how you wind your bobbins.
because they're on a shuttle
Yeah.
that went in, dropped in. It's very much like the sewing machine my mother had, which was a treadle machine. But yeah, actually,
Yeah, so it was a little bit difficult because you had to hand
yeah,
crank and guide your stuff through, hand crank with one hand and guide your
guys just
stuff through with the other hand. So,
that'd be tricky to do.
yeah, well, I guess you get used to it, I
I
suppose.
guess take it a long time.
Yeah, actually, it wasn't too bad. I mean, it depends on how complicated your sewing
Does it
is.
still work?
I think it does. I haven't used it. It probably needs oil, so
More than likely with it, but that's something. Now, I think there's one other picture. I do have another picture here, but I've got to find it. Just a second. I thought I had it in this bunch. So give me just a second to do that. Yeah, here it is. Now, this was something I was going to show when I was showing you my grandmother's linens. This was one of my grandmother's quilts as well. And this is, I think it's, I called it a bird of paradise, but I don't think that's what it is actually. Have a little movie here that I'm going to play for you to show you this up close. But this is all applique, and all of this is hand done. Everything on this is hand done. It almost looks like it might have been a whole cloth quilt, and all of this quilting on it was done by hand, and then she added all this applique. Um, and again, it would be needle turned applique as well. But you can get a closer look here at this. Must have taken her forever to do this. It's an absolutely gorgeous quilt. And it's got the scalloped edges on it and bias binding. And you can see she did feathers with it. Remember, all done by hand. And little tiny stitches. A little close up here of the applique. Probably moving a little too fast, but you get the point. There, they're up close. And see how tiny the stitches are on the applique? They're almost invisible. They're so small. So, yeah, to have the patience to do that kind of work, I don't know. I don't think I will ever be up to that level. If I can't use a sewing machine for it, screw it. I'm not doing it because there'd be blood and a lot of blood on that one. But anyways, that's one of the quilts. So we had another quilt that my grandmother had, and I put these on my mother's bed in the nursing home. One of the quilts, I told them they were under strict instructions, but they don't listen to you. I said, do not wash these quilts. I will look after them. I will come and switch them out every month or as it needs to be, and I will take them home and I will wash them in the whole bit. Well, one of those quilts got washed. Not this one, I'm glad. The other one wasn't quite as nice as this quilt, and it never came back from their laundry services. We never found it. And
Yeah, well, my mom had a really nice crocheted Afghan that she made. My sister took it to the nursing home, didn't label it, and ended up on her bed. And next thing you know, it ended up in the wash and disappeared.
well, worst case scenario was somebody stole it when they saw it, somebody who knew the value of a quilt, or it got mixed up in the laundry. It went to somebody else's room in the nursing home. Although they told me they looked in everybody's room and didn't find it, but they didn't look, not really look for it. And I look at it this way: if it did end up with somebody else and it gave them joy and gave them comfort, then okay. Not that that's fine, but at least it makes me feel better about it and I'm glad it wasn't this one, because this one, the workmanship on this is just master workmanship. Okay, so that was our little antique roadshow, so to speak. There, we don't have a lot of antiques. We're not antique collectors, but anything that we do have, as I said at the beginning, is stuff because it means something to us, because it was part of our family, something we grew up with and saw, and it's got memories for it. So, I don't believe in collecting old things just if they don't have
Just
any
because
meaning.
they're old.
Just because they're old, yeah. I know some people do. They like the kind of thing. It's decor, or they think that there's some value to it, or whatever, and so be it. But for me, the value comes in the sentimentality and in the connection with your past and past generations. And maybe someday someone will take the things that we have made and hang on to them. Yeah, I doubt it, my family, but whatever. So remember, we're doing our Christmas event, Cocktails with Stephen and Walter Christmas event tomorrow night, Christmas Eve, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Links in the show notes. New Year's Day, So Day, same thing. Links in the show notes for that. And well, I guess this will be the last time we'll be speaking to you unless you show up tomorrow night. So we hope you have a nice Christmas. Probably the first year that we can have sort of a normal Christmas, we're hoping. But remember, be cautious. Still have to be safe. It's still here. COVID has not gone away. We're just learning how to live with it. So keep that in mind. And we'll see you guys next time for who knows what. So if you got suggestions, let us know. Okay, say goodbye, Walter.
Goodbye.
Bye, all.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.